Salutations. Good evening, Wa'an, wherever you are. It's your boy Turtle Sage here. Once again, it's been a while since I've, really done, one of these good old-fashioned how-to food tutorial videos. And obviously, if you haven't seen, I've been quite busy, whether it be tournaments or lifting weights, getting in shape, what have you. But that's beside the point. Can't leave you guys hanging forever. Here we are. For today's episode, we are going to work on some basics of a weapon. If you haven't noticed that I've done a lot, the jian, or the Chinese straight sword. Now, in Chinese martial arts, the jian is known as the queen of all weapons. And it is typically the weapon of the scholar and or the nobleman, woman. Why? Because it takes forever to master. And as the old saying goes, in Chinese martial arts, it's 100 days of empty hand, 300 days of the saber, 500 days of the staff, 1,000 days of the spear, 10,000 days of the jian, straight sword. Now, why is it 10,000 days? Well, there's several facts that go into it. The jian, at its core, is a finesse weapon, and it is typically associated with finesse martial arts like Tai Chi Chuan. That is our signature weapon. Bagua. It's in several others. Not typically big on in the Shaolin styles from what I've seen. They do have it. But again, it's a higher level weapon. And it is usually associated with internal force. So this is why it is not the easiest weapon to do. So to get to that point, you have to build your body up. And to do that, mainly you will work on flexibility, loosening up your joints. So before I even practice straight sword, one of the main things that I do is I stretch. Start with my wrists, because the wrists are big. If you don't have wrist flexibility, forget about doing this weapon. It's just not happening, right? Also get the elbows in, right? Yeah, you heard that pop? That's my body telling me, hey, you're not 18 anymore. So, also want to get the chest, that thoracic hinge, the sternum, because in Tai Chi, that is a big one. It's part of the 5 bows, the elbows, the knees, the hinge of the chest. You want to get your shoulders into it. This is my probably biggest Achilles heel, my shoulders. Yes, I have these gorgeous silverback shoulders, right? I can tote that barge, lift that veil, impress women, frighten criminals. Beautiful. Horrible for this. Horrible for Tai Chi in general. So I've had to work my entire career to relax my shoulders. And you want to open your hip joints because, again, you got to get that spiral energy. So this is why I typically open those hip joints with your horse stance. Now this is for your external people, like if you do a Shaolin art like I do called Mahjong Lawhorn, you're going to be doing this a lot. You also want to get that splits in order. Oh yeah, there we go. Yep, didn't know a man like my size can move like that, right? But if I can do it, you can do it too. So work on that. Get those knees in order, get those ankles, because again, speed and agility, speed and agility. Watch a movie called Crouching Tiger, Hidden Dragon. It's nothing but that, speed and agility. Same thing with one of my favorite movies of all time, Hero, starring Jet Li, Donnie Yen. They have that famous courtyard fight scene in the rain. Jian versus Spear, King and Queen. With all that said, I digress. So once you've stretched, you want to do your basic Qigong exercises. If you are in Tai Chi, You know, you do the gathering because you want to relax. Because the trick to speed is relaxation. Stemming from the snake and the crane, right? Crane, snake, all that. They're both animals that rely on being soft and relaxed, right? And so once you've done that, you've slowed your heart rate, you're not, whatever's bothering you in the day, you know, I live in America, specifically in St. Louis, you know, murder capital of the Midwest. So there's a lot of stress around, right? So I have to do my Qigong and I have to relax. Again, these shoulders get in the way, these muscles get in the way, these dense bones get in the way, right? So I gotta learn to relax. So I do my Qigong, I do my standing meditation because structure is important. You'll find out why later, right? So before that, before you can get to anything with the blade, and for today's move, this literally goes hand in hand. See what I did there? To start with, single arm circle. This is why they say 100 days of empty hand. Yep. Yeah. And you can see doing that whole back and forth motion. Power starts in the feet, guided by the waist, expressed in the hands, right? Put my hand down. Do it with my shoulder. Do it with my shoulder. Right? You see that circle. Everything's working. Working in tandem. One part moves, all parts move. Again, this is important. This will come up in everything you do with this weapon. If all of your parts are not working in tandem, you cannot use this weapon. And this is why they call it the scholar's weapon, because you have to have knowledge of the human body, anatomy. You got to be surgical with it. And it's also like painting. So for my fellow nerds out there, you watch a show called Avatar: The Last Airbender. One of my favorite episodes was the character Sokka. He is not a bender, so he had to learn a new way to defend himself. Right? So this is where he learned the jian. And his sword teacher taught him many things about the sword. But before he could really get into the fine art of dueling with the sword, he had to do things like calligraphy and painting. So fun fact, when I went to China about 11 years ago, it was 12 years ago, there was this high-level Tai Chi master there who had beautiful calligraphy. And it stuck with me because the same movements that went into making his calligraphy, just like in Avatar: The Last Airbender, are the same movements that will go into doing the single arm circle and chin na and push hands and sword. And fun fact about me, I also like to draw and do sketches. And since I have really picked up my skills with the sword, also picked up my skills with drawing. Both are meditative exercises. They calm me down, they de-stress me. So I highly recommend doing both if you can. I'm not saying I'm anywhere near that of Pablo Picasso or one of those Korean artists in Japan or Korea who make Boondocks or Naruto, but I do okay. Anyway, I digress. It's beside the point. So, after you've done all the requirements that could bring you up to this point, then you learn about the sword itself. So, when picking a sword, you get a sword that is the correct length for your body. So, for me, you can see how it is hanging from my hand, like so. And I do this, you see this in a lot of all styles of Kung Fu. They have you holding the sword like this. Why? Because it also is a way for you to hide the sword. So you can flip out on somebody, get a quick stab in or a quick slice, depending on what you're doing. And because if it's too long, if it's all the way up here, it makes it unwieldy. If it's too small, well, it's harder to get in on people, especially if they're not using a sword. They might be using a spear or a guandao or whatever, right? Or a monk's spade. I love that weapon, by the way. So, again, you got to know your own body. And with that in mind, before you get started with a metal sword, also good to practice with a wooden one. You want to get your form down, right? Right? So you have a wooden one. The wooden one is also good for dueling, practicing dueling, I should say sparring, whatever. Now you see that video of me and my seeing brother Will. We are dueling. We probably should use wooden ones. Metal, not the safest. Easier to cut you, even though this thing is not sharpened, it is still dangerous. Now, the danger of you being cut by this is about, almost zero, never zero, but almost zero, never none. And so it's safer that way. Also, it'll help you get your form down a lot quicker. So pick up a wooden sword. They do this in Japanese martial arts with the katana. Pick up a wooden sword first, get your form down, and all that. So start with this. And this is called stirring the pot. Same as single arm circle, right? You see I'm doing a big circle. I can slow it down. And that's what you're developing, is the precision and the control. Now, once you get to that point where you develop a modicum of control, you've been doing it for a few years, then you get yourself a metal one. Now, one of my biggest gripes I see with a lot of Kung Fu people who make videos with the sword, they be doing all these cool, fancy moves, flipping, twirling, and doing extreme moves. And it looks cool for the camera, don't get me wrong, and the judges might love it. However, I prefer realism. If you've noticed that everything I show you, I will show you in the midst of battle. I will apply it. That is my mantra. So I don't claim to know everything, but what I do know, I know. Therefore, my sword in particular is not light as a feather, right? I drop it. The loud clang. It's like Piccolo on Dragon Ball Z or Goku, and they take off their clothes. They have weighted clothes, or Rock Lee with the weights, so they can move. So you've seen in my videos, I'm using this sword at tournaments and moving with agility, speed, and precision with a blade that has weight to it, right? Because the reason is, one is from a functional standpoint of form. If I cannot do this with a relatively heavy weapon, I'll know my form is incorrect, right? Because if I do this for long periods of time, my joints will get sore because the weight puts pressure on it. And if I don't have body alignment, if I'm not relaxed, if I'm too tense, I risk injuring myself. Also, you want weight to this if you are really serious about being good at dueling. You need a weapon that can actually stand up to it. Now, we live in the modern age. Dueling is definitely illegal. Do not do that. I do not recommend that. However, if you want the skills and precision that it takes to send somebody to the shadow realm, you get a sword with weight after you have gotten your form down to a certain point. So, there you go. And so, same thing. You see I'm pushing back and forth with my legs, but I'm sinking. So I'm keeping my structure while I do it. I'll go slow, 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 right? Come at angles. And the reason I emphasize that structure so much is because The same thing that goes into push hands and boxing and kickboxing and grappling and shuai jiao is the same thing that goes into fencing. If you do not have that structure, you cannot defend yourself. So if the sword is coming at me and I don't have any structure behind this blade, my blade will be bent back on myself just like a fist. I can't block nothing. I can't throw. I can't disarm somebody. I can't cut them. Exactly. I cannot cut them. Right? So, you do this with your wrist. Back and forth, back and forth. And a good exercise to do, if you don't have a sparring partner, you use your scabbard. You weave your blade around the scabbard. So this also helps you develop strength in your wrists. Especially if your weapon has weight to it. You're developing that precision. So again, power starts from the earth, directed by the waist, expressed in the blade. And again, it is also the scholar's weapon because you got to know the human body. It's death by 1,000 cuts. You're nicking the wrist. You're nicking the neck, the arteries. Right here. Hamstring somebody. They can't walk. They can't fight. And you're using your agility and elegance, your blades continuously moving, smooth, round, and continuous, like the principles of Tai Chi says, to get around them. So again, we'll get back to it. So see how the blade is always in front of me, right? You see it right here. And I'm not all the way thrusted out. This, it can be good, but you want a little bit of give in your elbow, right? So that way you can press, you can retreat, you can get at an angle, and you can get more juice in your stab. Because the same thing that goes into a stab is the same thing that goes into punch, right? And so when you can weave around, power comes from the earth, expressed in, directed by the waist, expressed in the blade, right? And you want to have that flexibility because you're weaving around something. You're not using brute force. I cannot emphasize this enough. This is not a brute force weapon. This is not like King Arthur, Lancelot, or even like Darth Vader in Star Wars. It's more like Dooku or Yoda. They're nimble. It almost looks like they're dancing, right? Flowing, just like a river. I can do it with both hands. And that's another thing I emphasize, being ambidextrous. There is no lefties or righties. There's always precision with both hands. You want to be ambidextrous. This is why I say you don't just emphasize your right. You don't just emphasize your left. You do both. This is why this weapon is, frankly, a labor of love, but a labor nonetheless. 10,000 days. And this is just the first move. Stirring the pot, right? Make the circle. Make the circle. Circle, stab. Circle, stab. Circle in, stab. Binary code. Circle, one. Circle, one. Cut, cut, slice, finish, right? And so with that said, I gave you all these exercises to work with. You have your single arm circle, the very basic. And then you stir the pot. But it's all the same move. If you can single arm circle with your hand, you can single arm circle with the jian. You can even do it with a spear, but we'll get into that in another video because the well is endless and you are figuring out the limits. You're only limited to your imagination. So with that said, if you like what you saw, like, share, and subscribe. Give your feedback in the comments. What you like, what you didn't like. I'm with it. Be respectful as always. And with that said, Sai Chin, Turtle Sage signing out. Peace.